Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Linda Sasser. I'm with Impact Performance Group, and I'm excited today to kind of join you with a topic that's not talked about. Well, I take that back. We talk about it a lot, but sometimes we don't talk about it as maybe as effectively or even as strategically as we should. So I hope today is a great day for us to just kind of share some thoughts with you. I would love for you to share those thoughts back with us. So this webinar, if you've never joined me with any of our webinars, we hope that they're very interactive, but of course you dictate whether they're interactive or not by your participation. Please feel free to ask questions throughout this webinar. Most of the time, the best impact and the best value for all of us are through the wide open questions and then the discussion back and forth through the questions section. And we'll have a Q&A at the end. However, please feel free to throw your questions in as we go. That makes it a lot easier for Christy, who will help us with those questions, to be able to kind of sort them and get them ready to be all answered. If we don't get to all of your questions, we typically send out an email afterwards to the whole group who participated with some of our thoughts towards that question. So thanks again for joining us, and I look forward to our conversation as we move forward. Well, before we move forward, let's thank the sponsor who's bringing this to us. Impact Workforce Technology is a technology company that has a unique niche with the contingent workforce. And so if you're struggling with recruiting or turnover, or perhaps it's just a lack of a temporary workforce when it comes to quality, or you don't want to use more than one staffing company because it gets a little chaotic. I know that I've got some clients on the other side of my business who have that happen, the chaoticness that's associated with multiple vendors. Or frankly, if you're just having trouble gaining clarity through the management of that whole process, whether it be how much money you spend, how you're budgeting, or how you're keeping up with that workforce. That's where Clarity VMS steps in. And so they really want to make sure that they're impacting, and the contingent workforce in particular, the temporary workforce that many of you have, and it's all about performance. How can we get that workforce to perform better? And a lot of times it's left out, I think, of our conversations, and we just talk about our full-time regular workforce. So that's who's bringing this to you today. I want to thank them for that. It's been a great topic that we get to move forward with. Before we dive in, I would love to know who's out there. So I've got a couple of polling questions for you. If you would just simply enter in A through F as far as what's your current role. Executive management, human resources, operations. Are you in financial accounting, purchasing, or if I didn't list it on there, if just push other, that would be fine with me. So that way I kind of understand who I'm talking to. Okay, looks like human resources is the largest group with 60% of us from that area, and then 20% financial and accounting, and then others about 20%. So thank you so much. That helps me a lot. Now tell me a little bit about your company, the size of your company, using the numbers on the screen. Just a few more votes are still coming in. And it looks like most of us are, gosh, it's kind of neck and neck. Most of us are over 200 employees. And then the next group is 51 to 100, and then it's evenly split between the others. So we're kind of all over the place today with a lot of our larger entities as well as our below 100. Thank you so much. That helps out a lot. And then one last question, so I kind of understand how to position ourselves today, is when it comes to the utilization of temporary workforce, do you use them? Yes, maybe perhaps for seasonal or projects, or yes, you use them, and gosh, they're quite important for your workforce, and no, thank gosh. Or yes, thank heavens. And that's my last question for a while. Still coming in. Let me wait just a bit longer as I have my techie here helping me out. Okay, looks like, yes, they're a very important part of our workforce is neck and neck with also seasonal, and then about 25% of you do not use it all. So thank you. That helps a lot. So I can kind of understand. You know, a lot of times when we do these seminars, we don't talk about the contingent workforce, and there's no need to, but what we've found out lately is we're getting questions to say, okay, I understand that, but how do I engage the temporary workforce? And so there may be opportunity for us to kind of discuss that today. So here's what we're going to focus on. Increasing efficiencies throughout the employment cycle. There is a cycle to employment, and it's probably a little bit larger or maybe more cumbersome than we often think it is. And that's one of the reasons that we have challenges with it. Improving employee engagement, I will tell you right up front, gosh, if there's one thing that we could get better at, every company, I don't care the size of your company, is employee engagement. It's a webinar all on its own. It's a workshop all on its own. And so we're gonna get into it, but we won't be able to dive into it as much as I'd like because of time and all the other subjects we're covering. If there is interest going forward in future webinars for us to really dig deeper into that subject, please don't hesitate to let us know that on our follow-up survey. Monetizing the cost of turnover versus the expense of increasing retention. That is a biggie. Put a star by that, those of you who are frustrated with some of the challenges that you're having with retention. And then educating and counseling top-level leadership on our labor strategy. So when I asked who you were, most of us are HR and finance. That's excellent. We'll be able to kind of speak financially to that, as well as, you know, from a human resource aspect. And we don't have a lot of executives on the seminar lines today. It didn't look like. So you know what, we're just going to talk about them. We'll talk about how we can address some of our concerns with them, who many times as an executive, it's bottom dollar. We have to talk bottom dollar. And so we'll kind of work through that during our time together today also. So let's start with the employment cycle. What the heck is it? I mean, many people think, well, I have an open order and our HR department recruits somebody and we interview them and off they go onto the floor or into the office, whichever type of hire. But it's really a lot more intensive than that. Now, I realize that recruiting and screening is not employment, but it is part of the cycle of employment because it's what we have to do to be able to find the employees we want for our company. So you've got literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 different sections that require a different type of focus. And I think what happens is we forget about that. And even if it's taking a visual like this and putting it up on your board and going through this process. Obviously, everything starts with a job opening. Anything to the left of job opening, that's your pool of available applicants. That's your recruit. That's the world out there that you get to recruit from. And then you have a job opening, which allows you to bring people into your organization. The recruiting that's associated with that, how you recruit, where you recruit, the screening, once you get those recruits in, how you screen and process, and then obviously making the hire, onboard, and training those individuals. That's a lot to do for one position. And so retaining, and I probably should have made that retention box bigger, that's so key because the minute a person turns over, you start that process all over. And every single box, you might as well put a list under it. In fact, that would be a great exercise for you all to do. What is the cost of every single one of those boxes? And we're going to get into that later. But there is a cost associated with every stage of the employment cycle. Here are some mishaps that we often see. Not understanding the entire cycle, skipping, or laziness, or we're just too rushed and we don't go through the entire cycle, or we don't honor it the way we should. So there is kind of a respect level to this whole process. And I know it's difficult, especially in our HR world, as we're working through this. Many times I know we're rushed. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. I need somebody in that seat. Well, the reason that, let's say, a production supervisor needs someone in that seat is because every hour that seat is empty, it's $1. It's cost. Finding out what that cost is, if you can write that down as a to-do, what is that cost for every hour a person is not in that seat? Because that's the things you're going to want to start tracking. That's the conversations we get to have with upper level when you start to ask for things that you need. And so we get rushed. Now, I say laziness, I don't mean that to infer that any of us are lazy. However, I've been a part of having a partner client that was very lazy in this process. One of the entities that we own is a PEO company, and we obviously help with outsourced HR, and we employ people on behalf of the client. And so the person coming into the clients is very important to us, and when we have turnover, it's a very costly thing, not only for the client but for us also. There was a laziness attached to their recruiting, a laziness both in how much money they wanted to spend, and a laziness in this process right here. They didn't want to take their time going through the process, or even they didn't want to even rush through the process. They literally skipped and went from job opening all the way to hiring them. And I'm not kidding. It was fill out an application and let's hire them if they're available. And so it was very messy. That to me was laziness, just pure laziness. Skipping the process could be that, or many times it's just the rush of needing a person quickly. Skipping or not respecting each phase, we just kind of mentioned that. Not knowing your strong suit or your weak areas. This is important too. As you work through this visual, kind of work through, okay, say, where am I strong, where am I weak? Gosh, recruiting, we are so strong with recruiting. We've got a great work environment. We have great pay rates. Everybody really kind of truly has a desire to work here. So we're strong there. I think our screening is strong, but something happens during that onboarding stage. We get fallout. And so whatever it is, it perhaps is recruiting. You can't get people in the front door. So figure out where you're strong and where you're weak, and then attack that as an individual block. Don't try to attack the entire employment cycle altogether. Attack each one of these separate. And we will dig into that a little bit more later. Not thinking strategically about each stage. This one is probably the one that's most disappointing, but it's also the most time consuming. You've got to put some thought to this. And it's really what is our strategy? What do we want our strategy to be when it comes to recruiting? There are so many companies that do not have a recruiting plan in place. If you don't have one, I would encourage you to put one together. And basically that is, even if you don't have job openings, put a recruiting plan together, because recruiting should happen all the time, all the time, all the time. You want a bench that you can quickly pull from. So don't just start recruiting when you have a job opening. Keep that going all the time. So think strategic about how you want this process to look. How long should it be? Hopefully it's not 2 or 3 weeks. That's awfully long. And so just kind of look at it both as individual blocks as well as an entire cycle. And then not understanding where your money is spent. Now this is a big one, and we're going to talk through this a little bit as we go forward. But each one of those stages costs money. And I think we would all agree with that. I think where it gets cumbersome is we don't know how to figure that out. And so we look at everything from perhaps a pay rate and the burden of what a person makes, the burden rate of taxes and such. And when we want to go forward and say we would like to institute a pay increase, there's immediate deflection. There's an immediate no, we don't have the money. I bet you have the money. It's just somewhere else, and it's being spent or saved somewhere else. And so that's what we have to look at, is how do we reallocate? Because if we're okay spending money on turnover, wouldn't it be okay to spend that same amount of money on retention? Because if you did that, that would decrease the turnover and allow you to spend that money on the retention. So understand where that money is being spent, how much is being spent. Okay, well, we talked about some of this, and you've got to put a dollar sign to it. You know, I worked with a client, and they were unsure of how to get that number and where to go. Those of you who are in the finance department, you could be so helpful to our human resource team in understanding all of this. Well, you understand it. It's access and getting access to this. But I think we so underestimate the cost of turnover, just one person. And so if you don't have a person, a project manager, somebody who can take this and just let's study it, let's figure it out, take a week and really go through and look at it. It wouldn't even take a week if you could get somebody to focus on it. But the cost of turnover is extremely high. The last cost estimate we did with the client here in Atlanta, where we're located, was $2,300. That was for a manufacturing production person who makes $9 an hour. So that pay is not extremely high. And for that one position, when they turned over, they had a black belt Six Sigma test, and they estimated that to be $2,300 because of the training costs that were involved. So it's costly. Once we figure out how to chart it and measure it, that's where you can now start being very strategic in how you save the company money. But we lose, obviously, when turnover happens. Production, there's unfilled position. What's the dollar sign there? Perhaps we're having underqualified people come into that position. So you're losing them. What's the pay up front? Can we use some of that money saved in retention to pay better up front? The performance, gosh, a new employee has ramp-up time. So you're losing not only every hour who's not sitting in the seat, you're also losing performance level because now you've got a new employee in there. And if you've got employees who have to cover for that position being gone, you're probably going to get a little bit of a notch down in their performance, as well as the quality and the safety and the speed of which things can be done. There's just a ripple effect to much of this that we sometimes just don't look at. It's easier to not look at. It's easier just to hurry up, get another person in. The lack of diversity in our recruiting efforts. There's an expense to recruiting. Even if you're using a staffing company, there's still an expense associated with that. The staffing company is just taking it on. So understand that somewhere that dollar is being spent, and moving them into your company when they turn over, it's a cost. It's a high cost to you, and it's a cost to the staffing service. So even put some, why would you pay a higher amount if the retention was better? So put some goals out there in front of your staffing company if you use them. Let them know, turnover, my rate's this. If they retain, yeah, my rate's this, and I'll pay a little bit more for that because I know I'm saving money. Make sure we're diverse in how we find people, where we find people, where we're looking for people. Find out who works well in your company. Figure out what their past employment was, perhaps even their education level. Be careful with that one, though. And seek out, recruit from, go source from, instead of just waiting on who walks in your door. And just another thing, and again, I used to be in the staffing industry, so I kind of get where people can slip up in that side of our business, and that's waiting for applicants to come to your front door. So if you're working with a staffing company, ask them, how do they go out and source people? And if they just sit in their office and wait for whoever comes in the door, that is not a good recruiting plan at all. Adjusting pay without fixing core issues. Okay, this is a big one, and I know many people worry about this, especially our production and operational people. Let's say you pay $9 an hour and you're thinking about going to 10. The last thing you want to do is pay a $9 an hour person $10. You want to go out and find that $10 an hour person, because you don't want the same quality, right? If you're going to get better quality for paying more, you need to make sure you're out looking for that $10 an hour person. And you can find them by everybody who refused the job when it was at 9. They just decided not to fill an application. They decided not to move forward because they felt like they were worth more. That's not an insult. That's the person you want. Somebody who knows they're worth more, because you're going to get a better quality worker. So be careful. This is a big concern for many, many, many companies that are saying, are being pressed to increase their rates because it's an employee market right now. And they don't want to increase their pay rate because they're afraid, I'll just get the same person. I'm just paying more for them. And then not tracking the cost of unfilled orders. We discussed that already. The overtime that's compensated for that position. So you're losing 8 hours on an empty seat, and then Johnny over here is having to work overtime to cover for that. So you can see the expense and how it just mounts up. So let's look at a story here. This is a true story. An employer with a large, flexible workforce could not get this workforce to meet production demands due to several factors, including a lack of consistent performance and high absenteeism. In response, bless his heart, sweet gentleman, he instituted a performance bonus to increase production. However, the bonus rewarded 25% of the same workforce that was already producing. The result, no production improvement, and the bonus cost was just under $100,000 when this program was finished and tested out. So an example of a lot of money spent on a situation of which he felt it would help increase the production and the performance. So what's the moral of that story? Well, money's not the solution if it's applied to the wrong challenge. Now, I know all my financial and accounting people like hearing that, believe it or not. Money isn't always the answer, and many times I think maybe through our laziness, I don't want to say it's lazy, but it's an easy fix. We always think, just pay more, just pay more, just pay more. It's not all about money, especially if you're applying the money in the wrong place. We have to make sure we apply our finances in the correct place. If you can pay more, make sure you put that money where it'll help the problem. His problem was more about the performance of the people based on the supervisory level and getting the right people in the front door. It was a low-paying environment. Here's the deal. Think about Maslow's, and I don't have Maslow's hierarchy, but I think we forget about that. Pull out your Maslow hierarchy and think about if you pay under $12, 12 and under, and you're in manufacturing or, well, frankly, maybe any industry, look on Maslow's hierarchy and see what the critical thought process and critical needs of a person are at that level. That could be an engagement plan for you, and you want your people to be more engaged. Look at what they need. As you climb that ladder, look at it again. It's a pretty neat little scale, and apply your engagement to what those people need. Sometimes our engagement piece, which we'll look at in just a little bit, doesn't fit the right people either. So we really have to watch how we're applying those things. And of course, that was his issue. Who's in the pipeline? It was, unfortunately, he was using, not unfortunately, I believe in staffing services. Gosh, I used to be in the business. But it was anybody who came in. And so there was a front of the pipeline problem on this one. And I would have rather, as we consulted with him, use that money. He spent almost $100,000. What in the world could we use that money for if we could get a better person in the front door? And then how could we take care and leverage and retain people? Retention doesn't cost a whole lot of money. Retention mainly, you'll hear me tell you this later, is in that supervisory level and how the treatment is. So a neat quote here that kind of drives this home for especially us in human resources. Human resources and leadership are the two areas that it's very difficult sometimes to get our hands around ROI. And we need to get better at it. So if I come in with a leadership development plan for your company, I've got to also come in with, here's the ROI from this leader development plan. We've got a supervisory training that's coming out in September. I hope you're on our list to send things to. I'm sure you probably are if you got this somewhere, but we have an 9-week course just for supervisors. It's a consistent course that they come in to for 4 hours once every 2 weeks. And the reason for that is we want to make sure we understand that I don't have to pay more money to help motivate people. I've got, depending upon Maslow's now, my supervisors can do a lot of this free. We just have to teach them. And in the rush of things, we tend to forget about that. And so let's not put a dollar sign on everything. That is a solution. You can put a dollar sign on everything that, frankly, is not aligned in your company, but our solutions don't always have to have a dollar sign. However, with HR and with leadership consulting, we do have to be data-driven. You have to be as data-driven about your hiring, as this quote says, as you are about your product. And I mean, I know our product is data-driven. I know we can tell a million things about the services that we offer our clients, yet we just haven't transitioned that into the HR realm. So here's the data that we need to know. And we'll send this PowerPoint out, I believe, to those of you who are on this, so if you don't want to write down everything, but this will be nice for you to write down just now to say, okay, yes, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1, I don't do it all, 5, we do exceptionally well. I know my numbers every week. I have real-time information. I know all these numbers. And then 3, well, I kind of know the numbers. You know, it's a monthly kind of thing. Keep in mind, if you're gathering up reports once a month, you're probably behind the 8 ball. It's old information, 4 weeks old information, sometimes even longer if you aren't able to accumulate that. And that is one of the things that our sponsor does with clarity. That's their thing. They say we bring clarity, real-time clarity every day so that you can make better choices and decisions on what you need to do. But how many applicants do you need to see for every hire? Okay, so if you have 5 openings, you don't need to interview just 5 people, right? And you certainly don't need to have 5 applications. So figure out, how many do I need? We're going to wash through that in just a minute. How many fall out and why? So as we're working through all these people, I've got 50. I'm only going to interview 10. Why didn't I want the other 40? Why did they fall out? Did I choose to make them fall out, or did they? But know why people are falling out of your employment process. Once employed, do you know your turnover stats? Not just your percentage of turnover. Here's what's important. Why? Why are people leaving? Where are they leaving from? Which division? Which department? Who's the supervisor? And when does it happen? Figure out those trends, because once you figure those out, you can apply a solution that's more customized towards the reason that you are losing people. Knowing the cost of turnover. Okay, if you're going to lose people, try to figure out that cost by going through that. So I know if I've got 10 people that left this week at one company, that's a lot of money. It's 23. That's 23,000 with that cost of the 2,300 that they gave us. It's a lot of money. Recruiting costs. Recruiting costs. There's cost to the time it takes to fill an order. So if you've got an open order, how long does it take? If I lose Johnny today and I now have an open position, how long does it take to fill that position? Is it 1 week, 2 weeks? How many hours is that? And then how much money per hour does that seat generate in production? That's the cost. You can see the cost just starts to magnify. It gets bigger and bigger, so that when you go to your CEO and say, we need to increase pay rates, or I want to increase retention dollars, I want to do this, this, and this, and he's backing up saying that costs money, you can say, well, actually, here's what it costs when we lose one person. I'm actually saving the company money. The cost of retention, obviously. What's it going to cost, and how are you going to save money when it comes to the retention? And then most of you know your carry cost per employee. And that's core employees and temporaries. Understand the carry cost of both. Temporary employees, it's easy. It's what your bill rate is. But the carry cost per employee, here's one thing we do have to watch. Typically, especially in our large organizations, there's a percentage that's attached, and most of us know it. Let's say it's 45% carry cost of the pay. What we've found as we start to help companies investigate their costs they're doing that on a company average. Yet all of their turnover is on the floor, where they pay $10 an hour or $11 an hour. that cost of benefits and all the total costs, that percentage is a lot higher there when you take that pay rate. What skews our numbers is when we throw the executive management levels in and the administrative and all the other higher paying positions. It skews that number. We recently did this just last week. Talked to a client, pulled those things apart and started looking at the different pay levels. I was shocked myself. The floor level, $11 an hour person, their carry cost was 70%. That's big. Now I haven't seen it. That's really big. But I think the reason why we're saying, oh gosh, no, ours is 35% and the temporary service is at 35%. So, you know, there's no difference. So there's a big difference. You're just going to have to divide those out a little bit differently based on what and where that turnover is happening. That might be a great exercise for someone who's going to go through and be the project manager for your cost analysis. And then why do candidates not accept your job offer or your application? That one is a big one, and I kept it for last to just think that through a little bit. The person that says no is more important than you think. And so when a person decides not to move forward in your hiring process, or they just don't even fill out an application, and I know those people are hard to get to because you don't know who's not filling out applications, that's what you want to try to figure out. Why are we not attracting that person? And it may not be pay. It may be your reputation in the community for one reason or another. Find out. I think we just dispel that too quickly. But understanding why people do not. Now, if you use, again, if those of you, because I know there's a large number on this call that use a staffing company, ask them. If you recruit 20 people and only 10 say, yeah, I'd like to consider that, that's great. I want to know about those other 10. Why did they not want this job? And start investigating those reasons and those situations. Okay, so knowing our data, here we are again with our employment process. Let's say we have 10 positions. And we know there's a cost associated. Again, every one of these blocks has a dollar signs attached to it. You all can do a much better job because every company is different, which how much money they spend in certain areas. But we know there's a dollar sign with every job opening, the cost of that job not being filled. And then, of course, we have to consider, what do we offer? What do we have to offer? What is this job? So understanding what we have to offer and then understanding the cost. When it comes to recruiting, let's say you've recruited for those 10 positions 50 applicants. So you've got some sourcing costs. Obviously, you've got your recruiter's time, and that's a cost. And you're looking at who's willing to consider that offer that you have. So you've got 50 people who are considering your offer. Out of those 50, you go through your process of screening, whether you just screen resumes, you do phone interviews, but you select 25, 50%, that's pretty good. I'm just throwing these numbers out. You all will have your own customized number. And out of those 25 that you interview, you're going to select 10. Now there's a screening cost associated with that. I know many of you, do drug testing, do background checks, whatever type of screening process you go through, you're spending it on more people than the 10 openings typically. And then of course there's the hiring process that takes place, and that's if they've completed the right thing. That square right there, that's a biggie. That probably needs to be divided out, hiring and onboarding, but training, it's a whole other thing. You've got a person in training for a week, they're not adding production. That job opening, while it's filled, it's still costing money because they're not in that seat yet. So you're still having that cost accumulate. Now you're paying for somebody, but you're not getting production. So it's a double hit in that situation for those of you who have training classes. And then of course retention and understanding the quality and safety of the production, the performance, and all the liabilities that are associated with retaining a workforce. So all of that started with 10 openings. We got our 50. We got 10. After we screened, we got 6. That's 6. And again, I'm throwing out numbers. Based on our experience, these numbers aren't out of the question at all. In fact, I might be conservative. What we need to understand is it takes Okay, 50 applicants to fill 6 positions in this scenario. What happens now if I have 20 openings? How many applicants do I need flowing through the system to get those 20 people hired? And I think that's where we miss it. And I think that's why we don't have recruiting plans. And I think that's why we don't put enough emphasis on the recruiting piece of things. We underestimate it. You're going to need 200. How many people are you going to need? Somebody else. My accounting people, do the math. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of recruiting. So now you're applying more dollars to your recruiting and the costs associated with that. So now I'm going to look at that recruiting box and say, I'm weak. I got to get better at that. I need to be better at what do I have to offer. I don't have enough people wanting to fill out my application for the type of job openings that we have. So have some fun and brainstorm on that box alone. As you know, there's hard costs. We've talked about those. There's soft costs. Look at your morale. Look at your engagement. When we got 10 open positions that aren't filled, that's hard on a lot of people. Supervisors now are getting edgy. They're stressed out. They don't know if they're going to hit production, so they don't talk to people as well. They're not engaged. Maybe they snap at somebody else, and they're, okay, that person's going to leave. There's so many soft costs that we miss. And then, of course, the cost of time and the time involved in that process. We normally don't put a dollar to that, but there is a dollar that can be pushed to that. Okay, let's have another polling question. What is your biggest, when you look at that employment cycle and you look at the different things that you are up against, what is your biggest challenge? Finding the qualified applicants, offering competitive pay and benefits, retaining good employees, or management unclear about the talents that are needed for your company? Okay, still a few coming in, but overwhelmingly 75% finding qualified applicants. And then the next one is with 29% is retaining good employees. 0 on competitive pay and benefits, and 0 on management unclear. So that's very clear. We're having trouble finding candidates, and we're having trouble retaining. And we are in an employment market right now where finding applicants is getting more and more difficult. We call that an employees market, meaning they get their pick and selection really of where to go. And the reason we're not retaining them many times is there's just a better place, a better position for them to work in. So let's think about this as we make our recruiting more efficient. Be clever about your recruiting. Think beyond the referral bonus. Now, there's all kinds of little tricks and trades of what you can do, but you've got to think about what your thing is. What differentiate you from your competition? And yes, you have competition, and I'm not talking about competition in someone who produces the same as product as you. I'm talking about competition for the workforce. And you've got to think of it as that. If you don't think of it as that, then you've got to change your mindset. You are competing for that worker out there. You're you can call yourself a headhunter, but you're like a talent agent who you got to win that applicant over. You've got to win that employee over to say, come over here and work for us. Here's why. Here's why we're different. Write that question down, get your team together, and brainstorm about that. Now, it might be difficult because maybe you're not different. But if you brainstorm through it, you'll find a way that you're different. And if you even brainstorm more, you'll say, I don't like not being different. Let's figure out how we need to be different. What do we want to be? And who do we want to be? And it may be that you need to rebrand the job that you're trying to fill. How do you make that call center rep job more appealing? We've got a couple of clients we consult with on the leadership side that are call centers or contact centers, however you want to deal with it. And gosh, that's a challenging environment. It's like a manufacturing type of position, but it's just in the clerical and office services space. And so how do we appeal to that? Is it just a call center job? Is it just you're going to be on the phone? selling, or the dreaded word telemarketing? No, it's not what you're doing. We want to find people we can help. We've got a product. It's very good. Our challenge is finding the people that we can serve and bring value to. And when we make that match, we make that person so happy because we've been able to help them in whatever sort of way or whatever it is that you're appealing. So if you love to talk to on the phone, if you love to help people, and you kind of have fun figuring out how to serve those people based on their needs and based on what we have to offer, then this is probably a cool job for you. Take what you have and differentiate it, and peel back that onion and find out really what is this all about. Most of what we do is going to impact, most of what anybody does is going to impact somebody somewhere. Who is it that you impact? And does that make a difference for some of the people who would join your team if they could understand that? And marketing isn't just for clients anymore. In fact, I think it's not just 50-50 anymore. I think we've moved to the 60-40. I think we've got to learn how to market to the employee workforce out there. We spend money, so much money marketing. In fact, okay, financial team, here's a challenge for you. How much money do you spend in marketing to attract clients? And then measure that against how much money you spend trying to attract good employees. And it should be maybe the same. And how much money is that you're budgeting towards that process? And then take that money and spend it correctly. Don't just throw it out there. Take your employment cycle and understand how and where you need to spend it. And then, of course, track it and measure it. And then, of course, I've already talked about recruiting from multiple sources. And well, we've talked about this throughout, but here you go. This will be a good filler when you get this PowerPoint if you want it. Let's look at our turnover expenses. Put a dollar sign next to these: recruiting, onboarding and training, lost production, and reputation. If you have a lot of turnover, you are forming a reputation. You might not think you are, but you are. And you can blame your turnover on people. Well, the workforce just isn't loyal anymore, or this generation just isn't, they're not good, they don't have good work ethic. You can't do that. You've got to own that. It's your reputation. So figure out, number one, what are your expenses? And reputation is a very soft expense. And here's why it's a soft expense. If your reputation is good, and if you invest in people, like the other square over here says, you're going to have people coming to your door and knocking on your door. Do you have any openings? Do you have any openings? You flip that recruiting cycle around. So investing in people, well, better upfront pay, maybe. Of course, this is something that you have to look at and study, and this is what we do when we are able to advise a client. It might not be, and I don't like, okay, I'm a German. My maiden name was Loffelholz. Linda Loffelholz. There's 13 letters in that name. Yes, it took me till third grade to spell it. I'm German. My daddy's 100% German. So I'm tight. I don't like to spend money when I don't have to. But if I'm going to spend it, I would prefer to spend it on the people, because it's the people who are going to make things happen for the company. So I'm not saying you have to pay up front. Depends on what your situation is. If you pay good and you're still losing people, that's a whole nother situation. That's a fun one to fix, and it can be fixed. It's actually more fun to fix. You're investing in ongoing training, not just one training first week they're there, but ongoing. Focus on the culture and engagement, because you're investing in those people. And I'm going to put reputation up there again. Your reputation is seen in town as a place that takes care of people, not a place that uses people, but a place that invests in their people. If you can create that culture, you need to market that. That's what you market. And have your people market that for you. Whenever we hear from peers, it's always a lot better than the executive leadership saying that. So whichever square you're in, you're going to spend the money. Would you rather spend the money fighting turnover and trying to manage turnover, or would you rather spend that same amount of money investing in your people? It's going to be spent. So figure out where you would rather spend it. And when you spend it over here on the right side, you're going to get your investment back. When you spend a lot of money trying to figure retention out and the turnover and just hurrying up and getting another person in and paying those high costs of turnover, then you're not going to get ahead. It's constant. It's hard to get off, that little treadmill. And the linchpin is leadership from the supervisor level up. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this. If you've been on any other of our webinars, we talk a lot about leadership and supervisors and how we invest and treat people. But our supervisors are crucial. The people on the floor talking to our folks every single day. How are they treated? Get out there and watch. And make sure they're walking, and make sure you're walking the floor, the plant, the office, so that you can see that. This is another one that I would encourage you to fill out. Why do people join your company? And then why do people leave? Get as specific as you can. Typically, these are pretty generic. Pay, career opportunities, culture. That culture piece is huge. How am I treated? Do I like my supervisor? Do I even feel appreciated? And then why people leave your company? It's crazy, isn't it? They will probably leave for the same reasons they joined. If they left somebody else and came to you because of a higher paycheck, someday they will leave because of a higher paycheck. If they came to you for a better career opportunity, someday they will leave for a better career opportunity. What that means is we have to keep that reason out in front of them. Help them grow so they could earn more pay through a career path. Let them know there's lots of opportunities here. Here's what you need to do to seize those opportunities. And here's our culture. I'm going to leave because I'm not treated right. Or I'm going to stay because I am. And your people are culture keepers. They can learn to assist with that. Okay, this is easy. We're not going to spend a lot of time with this, but I would like for you to play with it. Again, this is easy. It's matrix. It's just a silly little eye-opener with wages on the left, low wages, high wages, you can see, and then our culture and our treatment on the bottom, and you can see poor culture and treatment or great culture and treatment, and they're in two different places on this. So one of the things I'd like for you to do afterwards, or you can do it now if you want, is put a mark where you think you're at on here. And then that's how you can start to make a goal as to where you want to be. And then obviously to start attacking these the way you want. And you'll see this when you get the PowerPoint, but I don't have to spend time on this. You know that if you're low wages and low culture and treatment, good Lordy, you got some issues. And there's going to be some very difficult environment issues there. If you pay well, but you don't treat people right, you're still not in a great place. You're in more of a pay to stay. I'll stay around because they pay me. But you're still going to have some challenges. Low wages and great treatment, that's an interesting, different challenge. Actually, it can be lived with. There's some challenges in the front of your recruiting pipeline because you won't get applicants that you'd love to have as employees because of it. But what I like about this one is we've seen employees actually come back to a company like this for less pay because they understand the culture of the company and they loved working there. And of course, the place we want to be. You want to be the preferred place to work. And to do that, you've got to pay fair wages. You don't have to be the highest. And you got to treat people well. Those two things, the culture and your wages, really dictate where you're going to be when it comes to your spend on turnover and your spend and cost of retention. So figure out where you're at and then set a goal. Where do you want to be? And then make a list. Here are the things we need to do to be able to seize that area. That's just another exercise for you when you get your follow-up literature. Improving engagement. I'm going to kind of speed this along because I want to make sure that we get to the CEO piece, and I know we're running out of time. But for your engagement pieces, and again, this is a whole another breakout that we can do. Knowing why people leave is real important, I think, for engagement. So make sure you're conducting your exit interviews. You may want a third party to do that. It might be more safe. You probably will get more factual information. Focus groups are one of the best ways to get the facts. Your people know why people leave. If you don't do exit interviews, do a focus group, call people in. Again, get an outsider to help you so that they won't think that there's retaliation. But they'll tell you why people leave that company. We get our greatest feedback for our clients through focus groups. Make sure you're walking the floor, and available people need for their leaders to be available. Showing appreciation, calling teammates by name, and of course just being noticed. Somebody noticed I was here today working. I don't care how much money you pay. I don't care if you're upper level management or on the floor making a minimum wage. Everybody wants to feel appreciated, and everybody wants to know that them being there makes a difference. Beware of segregation. This is a whole nother webinar if there's interest. This is for you all mainly who are using a staffing service for quite a bit of your workforce. And I know we've got a lot on this call from the surveys earlier. We see a lot of segregation in this area. They're called temps, or they're called vendors. They have to park in a certain area. Sometimes they have to wear a certain shirt that says the name of their temp company. That's such segregation. And take the t-shirt off. Well, don't take it off, but look beyond the t-shirt. That's a person. And it's probably a really good worker. Why in the world are we treating them different? And frankly, I don't think we should. And so how are we treating that workforce? Because that workforce many times can produce better. They're trying hard to become full-time. I asked an individual one time in a focus group, why do you want to go full-time so bad? What's the difference? She said, the way we're treated. And that got to my heart. That just got to my heart. And it shouldn't be that way, guys. And treating people well doesn't cost a penny. That's the craziness about all this. And we're forking out money with bonuses, and we're forking out money with high pay. And maybe if we just treated people better, it would fix all of that, and you wouldn't have to spend a thing, and your culture would be incredible. Now you can tell that's a big soapbox of mine. And that's kind of the leadership background and the supervisory things that we like to do for companies. So yes, I'm passionate about that. It's something to be aware of. And of course, be aware of peer pressure within your company. Those long-term employees who have been there for a while, and you have a new employee show up, whether it's a temporary or just new employee, and they're starting to outproduce them, be careful and watch, because they'll make a high-producing new person feel inadequate and feel bad, and it'll be a place that's not warm and fuzzy, and they might leave just because of how they're treated by the other employees, not even their supervisors. Okay, let's get to the fun stuff. Many times the challenge with this is we don't know. We don't have our information. We don't even have access, perhaps, to data. You've got to get access to this data. Your full-time workforce and your contracted workforce. You've got to be able to understand the cost of that temporary workforce that you have in place, not just the cost per hour, the cost for turnover, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Worse yet, now this is even worse. You have the data, but you don't know what to do with it. And, you want the facts. Just get the facts and get the solutions, and that's all you need to know. What we've seen a lot of in my partners over there who are sponsoring this workshop, Clarity VMS. Here's one thing that's interesting about their company. You've got all the data in the world that you want on your contingent workforce. What's interesting is no one does anything with that data. So they've got a division who actually says, here's your data, here's the input, now here are some suggested solutions that we can help you with. Data without action is nothing. It's really nothing. In fact, it's just a bunch of money, again, being spent to have what? Numbers, data? Who cares if you're not going to do anything about it? In fact, it's more frustrating to the workforce if you don't do anything about it. So go to your CEO with facts and solutions. You got to connect those two together, and you got to put a dollar sign to it. Now, head and heart, if you've heard any of our webinars, we have a whole leadership on head and heart facts. Your CEO needs to be addressed with two things. Number one, from the head, here's what it's costing us. Turnover costs us this. I'm asking for more money. I'd like to pay more, whatever it is you're asking for. and we're going to apply these solutions. Here's what's going to happen, and here's what we anticipate, that we will save this much in retention. We'd like to take those savings, have it on a spreadsheet, whatever you've got to do, and well, we have some choices. Now we have options. Money gives people options. Personally, if I make more money, I have more options, right? You too. Companies are the same way. If we can save, we have more options. We have more things to be able to do with our money. Labor costs, what is your labor cost versus the hourly cost versus the cost per unit, if you can grab hold of those things. Now the heart side, those are the head sides. The heart says our reputation in the community is going to be so much better if we do this. The morale of the workforce will be so much better if we do this. That means our production will go up, our performance will go up, our quality gets better, our safety will even get better. We're going to have a happy workforce, and when you have a happier workforce, you have a higher performing workforce. Not only that, our supervisors will be able to be at a different level, but you know what, if they're not and we have to move them along, guess what? We have a workforce now that's stable, that we can pour into, and we can move into a supervisory position. Those are heart facts. Depending upon how your CEO is wired, you have to hit them with either one of those or both. I would suggest both, then lean towards wherever your CEO is, more heart or more head. But you've got to attack both. We forget about both of those. And as HR people, those of you that are in the room, you typically are a little bit more heart driven. And if you're selling to me about that, that's fine. Go ahead and hit me with that. All my financial accounting people that are on the call, you're probably more head driven. You're going to want to see a spreadsheet. Where does this save us money? Prove it out. And so I will tell you this. If you can't get the number and you don't have the number, make it up, because there's nothing worse than somebody making up a number and it drives your CEO nuts, or it drives your financial team nuts. And you can say, look guys, you didn't give me the number, so I have no choice but to make it up. Now, if you don't like this number, that's fine. Tell me what number I should put there. And until you put something there, I'm going with this number. That's how you're going to have to push this along, so that you can move this and gain some movement, gain some ground for it. Okay, gosh, I'm sorry I didn't leave much room for Q&A, but I know we've had some questions come in just from Christy over there hollering. So we've got about 4 minutes. Let's go ahead and take a couple. And Christy, you tell me which questions you want to ask. I don't care. You go ahead and prioritize based on listening today.
All right, the first one is, it seems like companies aren't willing to invest much on floor-level workers. How do we get top-level leadership to see the value in spending more money in the front end to keep good people?
Well, that question was probably asked, I hope, before that last conversation that we just had. I think you're going to have to show them the data, and you're going to have to give them the solutions. Data and solutions. And if you can work through it where it makes sense financially and it makes sense for the heart of the company, then you just have to ask, why would we not make this decision? And what is holding us up from this decision? I think it gets back to, guys, because I've heard it told to me time and time and time again, I don't want to pay more and get the same. So figure out how to eliminate that. That's first objection you're going to get. Second objection is, how do I know this is going to work? And are you going to put your job on the line for this? Well, are you? I've had a CEO ask me that once, and I was kind of new to the company, and I had to say, I will. At that time, I was living in a motorhome, so it wasn't. We were building a house, and I was living in a motorhome. Heck yeah, that motorhome's expensive. That's got wheels on it. Seriously, it's a true story. And we laughed about it. But you got to believe, and you got to not be lazy, and you got to get your team. An HR person cannot do this alone. Those of you who are in the HR department, I believe that there should not be an HR department. I think HR should be our entire company. Because think about that word, human resources. We all should want things better for humans. We all want the quality of life of ourselves and our people to be better. And we all should be seeking out resources to make our company better through other people. So HR, customer service, shouldn't be a department, it should be the whole thing. And so so hopefully I answered your question more specifically there in the end.
Okay, the next one is, our company has anywhere from 50 to 100 contingent employees during peak production times. How do we focus on employee engagement with a group that may only work for us a few months out of the year?
That is an excellent question, and we just had this conversation with a company where I'm providing leadership development inside the company, and they have a workforce, and so engagement, of course, is what we're talking about, and she has the same question. God, we have so many temporaries, and she was a little bit frustrated, and she said, how can I show that same engagement? And I said, well, okay, they're here seasonally, right? She said, yes, you know, it was a fourth quarter, third and fourth quarter, but fourth quarter really. And I said, so they're not full-time regular? No, probably never will be, but you know, if they do really good, they might be. And I said, so they're kind of visitors to your facility. She goes, well, yeah, I guess you can call them that. I said, so let's think about this differently. So when I come and visit the facility, there's a parking spot for me out front. It says visitor. I get premier parking. But I noticed for you, all your temporaries have to go to that far, far, far away parking lot. And I've even heard that at night they have to walk out there in the dark. Why is it that they have to park on the other side of that line, and yet they're visitors to your company? And so we started looking at the philosophy. Why do we treat somebody who has a guaranteed job, steady, paycheck coming in all the time, showing up, sometimes, of course, good workers. I'm not saying they're not good workers. But why is it that this visitor, who we need good production for 3 months, and they know there's a finish line, and yet that other worker doesn't have a finish line? I think we got to treat them better. I think we got to pay them better too, guys. I'm out there to say, pay them a little bit more, you know, and of course, oh, the hands in the room went up. Oh, we can't do that. There's no way we can do that. Then our full-time workforce, we get mad we're not paying as much. And I said, well, no. We would trade. Okay, we'll trade your full-time job with benefits if you want to come over here and make more money for 3 months. And then in January, you don't have a job. That's what you're trading. You see, this is, don't we pay more for FedExing a package faster? Yeah. The whole psychologically, I think we're upside down on the whole staffing industry anyway, but the staffing industry has put a lot of that on themselves, so I'm not feeling pity for them. Sometimes I do feel pity for the people, but okay, there you go. There's my philosophy on that. So let's do one more. Could you have another question? Let's just do one more. I'm sorry, I don't have time for any more, Christy.
Yeah, last question. Our pay is at the lower end of the scale, but we simply don't have the means to increase it right now. How can we compete with other companies around us who offer a better starting wage?
Okay, go back to that matrix that we did. And if you can't pay more, you've got to be the best in your area on treating people well. Treat people great. And it doesn't cost any more money. We've tapped on that a little bit today. Get your supervisors to understand, if all of these people, if all these employees were volunteers and you didn't pay them anything, how would you get them to come back the next day? I asked that question of a group of employees or supervisors. And they said, oh my gosh, volunteers? Well, we'd have to make sure we told them, way to go, good job, we need you back tomorrow because, you know, we really need to get this done and we can't do it without you. Thank you so much. And I kind of laughed. I said, well, why don't you say that to your people you're paying? Why? That encouragement everyone needs. So psychologically think that through. If all of your employees were volunteer, how many of them would come back tomorrow and volunteer for you as the leader or for the supervisor? It's a tough question to answer. Whatever those things you would do for the volunteers, figure out how to do that for your paid workforce. So don't feel like you have to be the best paying place in town. But I will tell you, if you're lower, like this situation, you've got to be the best at your culture piece, treating people well. And when you see a supervisor not treating people well, you call them out. And I don't think you need to call them out in front of people, but what you could say is, hey, Johnny, I'd like to see you today for about 10 minutes before you leave for lunch. That just sends a message. Okay, maybe she's going to talk to him about how she deal with that kind of stuff. So that would be the answer to that question, is come up with a game plan, get some people together and say, how do we get better over here in this matrix? Well, I'm sorry. Here's what we'll do. We'll email out any other questions that we have and kind of address those in our follow-up email. And thanks, first of all, everybody for joining us. We've had fun working through this topic, and thanks to Impact Workforce Technology for allowing us to really be in front of your group of your audience and your clients. And thanks everybody again for coming, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to connect with us.